a period of time. They've arrived without sound, without signal, drifting above our world's most guarded corners, unseen, unannounced. Missile fields, command centers, underground silos, places where silence itself holds the weight of destruction. Each time, the systems flicker, lights die. Then suddenly, everything returns. No alarms, no warnings. Just a brief, impossible gap, like reality held its breath. And every time, the same question lingers. What are they observing, and how much do they already know? Welcome to Night Whisper, where secrets speak in quiet tones. So dim the lights, settle in, and listen closely. Because tonight, we descend into one of the strangest enigmas of the modern age. Why do unidentified craft always appear? Where our most powerful weapons sleep? From the desolate plains of Montana, to the frozen silence of Siberia, to the deserts of China, security cameras and radar logs tell the same story. A sudden power loss, a flash of movement above the silo, and then nothing, like a shadow that only exists between blinks, whispered they were here. In 1967, every missile in a Montana base went offline, all at once. Engineers found no cause, but the gods swore they saw a glowing object hovering overhead. Years later, in Russia, it happened again. Another blackout, another silent visitor, different skies. Same questions. Are these warnings? Are they watching to keep us from using what we've built? Or are they measuring, testing, waiting? Each incident leaves no trace, no sound, no proof, just the echo of a presence we can't explain. Whisper they see everything. And so, we keep watching the skies, hoping for answers that never come. This is Night Whisper, where the silence is never empty. In the fading twilight of World War II, humanity unleashed forces that would reshape its future in ways both triumphant and terrifying. On July 16th at 5:20 a.m., the Trinity test detonated the world's first nuclear bomb, splitting the pre-dawn silence with a blinding flash of light and a roar that echoed like the voice of creation itself. The atomic age had begun a new era defined by humanity's ability to wield unimaginable destructive power. Yet, according to some, this moment marked the genesis of something else, something far less tangible, but no less profound. The Trinity test was not just a scientific triumph. It was a signal, a beacon, announcing humanity's arrival at a perilous crossroads. The detonation at Alamogordo stood as a testament to human ingenuity, but it also carried a weight of consequence that extended beyond the physical realm. Scientists like J. Robert Oppenheimer, who watched the explosion unfold, were haunted by its implications. Quoting the Bhagavad Gita, Oppenheimer later reflected, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." His words captured the gravity of the moment, but they also hinted at a deeper unease, a sense that this act might have drawn the attention of forces beyond human comprehension. Just 2 years later, in the summer of 1947, another event in New Mexico would ignite a firestorm of speculation that has yet to be extinguished. Near the small town of Roswell, something crashed in the desert. The U.S. military's initial press release described the recovery of a flying disc, a phrase that sent shockwaves through a public already grappling with the dawn of the nuclear era. Within hours, the story was retracted, replaced with the more mundane explanation of a downed weather balloon. The swift reversal did little to quell curiosity. Instead, it planted a seed of suspicion, a question that would grow into one of the most enduring mysteries of the modern age. Were we alone? Or had something else taken notice of our newfound power? The Roswell incident, whether a genuine extraterrestrial encounter or a misidentified military experiment, became a cultural touchstone. It was the spark that ignited widespread fascination with unidentified flying objects, UFO. As the world entered a new phase of tension, Cold War, a global standoff, defined by the race to amass nuclear arsenals, reports of strange aerial phenomena began to multiply. These sightings were not limited to rural deserts or isolated towns. They were often reported near the very heart of the nuclear enterprise, military bases, testing grounds, and research facilities. By the late 1940s, the US government could no longer ignore the growing number of UFO reports. In 1949, an internal FBI memorandum, known as Memo 6751, surfaced, hinting at official acknowledgement of the phenomena. The document referenced flying saucers and suggested that some within the government believed these objects might not be of earthly origin, though its authenticity remains debated. The memo revealed a truth the public was rarely privy to. The government was paying closer attention than it let on. That same year, the US Air Force launched Project Sign, its first formal investigation into what it called flying discs. This effort evolved into Project Grudge, and later, the more widely known Project Blue Book, the public face of the government's UFO inquiries. While these programs operated in the open, offering explanations that often downplayed sightings, a quieter narrative unfolded behind closed doors. At nuclear laboratories like Los Alamos, where the Manhattan Project had birthed the atomic bomb, scientists and security personnel began reporting unexplained aerial phenomena. Glowing lights, silent and swift, were seen hovering over restricted zones. In Nevada, at the proving grounds where atomic tests were conducted, guards logged sightings of small, luminous orbs drifting across the desert sky, appearing before and after detonations. Radar operators at air bases tracked objects performing maneuvers no known aircraft could replicate: sharp turns, sudden accelerations, and disappearances that defied the laws of physics. These reports were meticulously documented, but rarely shared beyond classified briefings. A pattern began to emerge, subtle, but persistent. The sightings were not random. They clustered around the epicenters of humanity's most dangerous technological advancements. Each major nuclear test, from Trinity to the hydrogen bomb, seemed to coincide with a spike in UFO reports, not only in the United States but across the globe. When the Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb in 19, intelligence agencies noted a similar uptick in sightings, as if the unleashing of nuclear power sent ripples through some unseen dimension, drawing attention from forces unknown. Then came the summer of 1952, one of the most dramatic and well-documented UFO incidents in history. The Washington, D.C. sightings. For several nights in July, radar operators at Washington National Airport and Andrews Air Force Base tracked unidentified objects moving through restricted airspace over the nation's capital. The objects appeared on multiple radar systems, ruling out equipment malfunction. Fighter jets were scrambled to intercept, but each time they approached, the lights vanished, only to reappear once the jets returned to base. Witnesses, including pilots and ground personnel, described the objects as glowing, disc-shaped, and capable of speeds and maneuvers far beyond known aircraft. The incident dominated headlines, forcing the Air Force to hold a press conference, the largest since World War II, to calm public panic. The official explanation blamed temperature inversions and atmospheric illusions. But for those within the military, the timing and location raised troubling questions. The Washington incident was not isolated. Reports from nuclear facilities continued to accumulate, painting a picture of a phenomena seemingly drawn to the sites of humanity's most destructive creations. At Oak Ridge, Tennessee, security personnel reported unexplained lights in the sky. At the Hanford site in Washington state, where plutonium was produced for the Manhattan Project, similar sightings were logged. Even early civilian nuclear power plants reported occasional incursions by unidentified objects. The connection was impossible to ignore. Wherever nuclear technology was developed, tested, or stored, something else seemed to take an interest. Project Blue Book cataloged over 12,000 UFO sightings before its closure in 19. Most were explained as weather phenomena, aircraft, or celestial objects. Yet hundreds remained unresolved, and among them, a subset carried quiet notations hinting at proximity to nuclear sites. These cases were rarely highlighted in public reports, but they fueled speculation within military and intelligence circles. Why were these objects appearing near missile silos, test ranges, and research facilities? What did they want? As the Cold War deepened, so did the secrecy surrounding these encounters. The public became captivated by the idea of extraterrestrial visitors. Hollywood filled theaters with flying saucers, while pulp magazines sensationalized every sighting. Beneath the spectacle, a sobering reality persisted. Retired officers and scientists later spoke of lights hovering above missile silos, of sudden shutdowns of nuclear warheads, of radar tracks that appeared and vanished without warning. Each account circled back to the same haunting question: why were these phenomena so often observed near the world's most powerful weapons? By the 1950s and 60s, the nuclear arsenal had grown to tens of thousands of warheads. The world stood on the brink of annihilation, a tense standoff that threatened to erase civilization itself. Amid this global anxiety, the UFO phenomenon seemed to mirror humanity's fears, appearing as a silent observer to our capacity for self-destruction. Some believed these sightings were a warning, a message from an advanced intelligence, urging restraint. Others saw them as reconnaissance, a means of monitoring humanity's dangerous new toys. No answers came, only more questions. This story does not seek to offer conclusions. It seeks alignment. The convergence of timelines, the repetition of incidents, and a quiet, persistent connection between humanity's most devastating inventions and the appearance of something unknown in our skies. The Trinity test, with its blinding flash and earth-shaking roar, was more than the birth of the atomic age. It was the moment humanity announced itself to the cosmos. And, perhaps, something answered back. As the Cold War unfolded, as nuclear stockpiles grew and secrecy deepened, that answer lingered in the form of lights in the sky, silent and watching, leaving us to wonder. What exactly had we awakened? On the crisp morning of March 24th, 1967, beneath the vast, windswept plains of central Montana, an event transpired that would challenge the boundaries of military protocol, technological reliability, and human understanding. It was not marked by the thunder of explosions or the clash of armies, but by an eerie silence and the inexplicable failure of systems designed to be This incident, shrouded in secrecy for decades, involved the heart of America as a nuclear deterrent and an uninvited presence in the skies above. Malmstrom Air Force Base. Malmstrom Air Force Base, near Great Falls, Montana, was a cornerstone of the United States strategic defense during the height of the Cold War. Originally built in 1942 as a training field for World War II pilots, it evolved into a crucial hub for the nation's intercontinental ballistic missile program. By the 1960s, Malmstrom housed the 341st Strategic Missile Wing operators of hundreds of Minuteman I missiles. These missiles were buried in silos scattered across Montana's plains, each armed with a nuclear warhead capable of crossing continents, 56 feet long, 65,000 pounds. Designed to launch within minutes of an order, each was a technological masterpiece. They were the silent sentinels of deterrence. Machines built not to fight, but to ensure that no one dared to. Beneath the surface, launch control centers, known as LCCs, housed 2 officers in each underground capsule. They monitored 10 missiles apiece in what were called flights. The capsules were fortified against nuclear blast waves, powered independently, and connected by hardened communication lines. The officers, often young lieutenants, were rigorously screened, psychologically tested to shoulder the burden of world-ending authority. On that March morning, Captain Robert Salas sat 60 feet underground in the Oscar flight control capsule near Roy, Montana. 10A 26-year-old Air Force Lieutenant Salas was paired with First Lieutenant Fred. The shift was routine. Monitor status boards, run diagnostics, maintain readiness. The 10 missiles under their command were on full alert. The Cold War's tension was thick, the Cuban Missile Crisis only 5 years behind them. Nuclear readiness was not just policy. It was survival. The first sign of trouble came as a phone call from the surface. A flight security controller reported seeing strange lights in the sky, red, glowing, moving with uncanny precision. Salas, trained to remain calm, brushed it off at first. Maybe a trick of light, or the planet Venus in the pre-dawn haze. Montana's open skies could play tricks, especially in the early hours. The gods shouted that the object, a large, pulsating red orb, was hovering directly over the front gate. Immense, and nothing like any aircraft he had ever seen. Salas alerted his commander and told the guards to stand by. But before any action could be taken, alarms erupted inside the capsule. The status board, a grid of lights indicating missile readiness, began to fail. One by one, 10 green lights flipped to red no-go. Within seconds, the entire flight went offline. 10 separate silos, miles apart, simultaneously disabled. A failure like that was virtually impossible. The system had multiple redundancies to prevent it. Salas and Mewald ran diagnostics. Power was stable. Communications intact. No sign of seismic activity. No electrical surge. No environmental cause. It was as if something invisible had reached into the system and simply switched it off. Above ground, security teams watched the red light hover for a moment longer, and then streak away into the sky at impossible speed. No explosion. No debris. Just silence. Within hours, the base was flooded with investigators. Maintenance crews from Boeing, the Minuteman, SA manufacturer, combed through every circuit in connection. Air Force specialists ran tests, looking for signs of sabotage, mechanical fault, or radiation. Nothing. No physical damage. No logical explanation. The official report labeled the event an unknown electronic anomaly, a phrase meant to fill the void where understanding should be. Salas and the other officers were debriefed, ordered to remain silent, and the event was classified. For years, it remained buried in archives, a secret known only to those who had witnessed it. But Salas never forgot. The implications were staggering. If America's most secure nuclear weapons could be rendered useless by an unknown presence, what did that mean for national defense? Decades later, as secrecy began to erode and Cold War documents were declassified, Salas finally spoke out. In the 1990s, now retired, he shared his story publicly. His account was steady, unsensational, and consistent. He never claimed to know what the object was, only that its appearance preceded the shutdown by mere minutes. Others backed him up. Lieutenant Colonel Duin Arneson, a communications expert at Malmstrom, recalled classified memos referencing UFO activity tied to missile malfunctions. Captain Eric Carlson and his deputy, Lieutenant Walt Fiegel, from nearby Echo Flight, confirmed that a similar shutdown had occurred there just days earlier, on March 16th. 10 more missiles, disabled without cause. The official explanation cited a logic coupler fault, yet rumors of glowing aerial objects persisted. Freedom of Information Act requests decades later revealed redacted documents hinting at airborne unknowns interfering with missile systems. Strategic Air Command memos quietly noted concern, but the connection was never acknowledged in public. In 2010, Salas appeared alongside other retired officers at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. The event, organized by researcher Robert Hastings, brought together veterans who claimed similar encounters. Under oath, Salas recounted the incident again. "I didn't know what they were," he said, only that the timing was no coincidence. His calm tone carried the weight of experience and the silence of decades of secrecy. Skeptics offered explanations. Some blamed misidentified aircraft, atmospheric distortions, or even Mars, which had been bright in the March sky that year. Others argued that system malfunctions were common, and coincidences inevitable. A later Pentagon report suggested some missile shutdowns of that era were caused by classified electromagnetic pulse tests. But event in Oscar flight was never definitively explained. Still, the data from Malmstrom tells a stubborn story. Launch logs confirm simultaneous failures. Radar records show unidentified returns in the area. Witnesses, from security guards to radar techs, describe the same thing: a glowing, disc-shaped craft. Silent, capable of impossible acceleration. The Malmstrom mystery remains more than a UFO tale. It's a story about control and its sudden loss. About a moment when humanity's most powerful weapons became powerless under the gaze of something unknown. For Salas, it was a warning. If something could so easily neutralize the most advanced systems on Earth, then perhaps humanity's command over its own destruction was never absolute. Today, Malmstrom still operates, guarding Minuteman III missiles under Montana's Big Sky. But the echoes of 1967 remain a cautionary whisper in the launch silos in the minds of those who stand watch. If an unseen intelligence, extraterrestrial, adversarial, or something beyond comprehension, can tamper with our nuclear arsenal, it forces a chilling question: who truly holds the power? October 24th, 1968, under a clear, frozen sky in North Dakota, something unknown appears above Minot Air Force Base. The night is calm, visibility perfect, ideal for radar, flight observation, and something else that seems to be observing us. Minute AFB, home to hundreds of buried Minuteman missiles, stands as a nuclear fortress during the height of the Cold War. Around 2 a.m., Airman First Class Bond and his team spot a glowing object hovering low near one of the missile silos. The object pulses from bright white to deep orange, completely silent. No wings, no rotors, no sound. It measures around 200 feet across, drifting just 500 feet above the silos. An impossible presence in restricted airspace. RAPCON radar picks up the same target, confirming it's real, not illusion or weather. The blip moves intelligently, climbing to 70,000 feet, then diving rapidly and executing 90-degree turns with no loss of speed. The object positions itself directly above a nuclear silo, as if scanning or inspecting the site. Witnesses describe a glowing oval craft, its underside shining so bright it casts shadows across the frozen ground. Security teams observe it, respond to their movement, lowering as they approach, retreating smoothly when they advance. Command scrambles a B-52 bomber, callsign Wheeler 27, already in flight from Minot. The bomber's radar locks onto the same target, a solid, metallic return, confirming it's a physical object. For nearly 20 minutes, the UFO follows the B-52, keeping pace precisely at 1 mile distance. Crew instruments malfunction, radios jam, and the plane's systems flicker under the object's presence. Visual contact confirms a massive illuminated disc following the aircraft, moving with deliberate intelligence. On Degron jeeps chase the light across the dark plains. One patrol gets close enough to see the object hovering directly above. The men are engulfed in an orange glow. Their radios fail, and in a flash, the object vanishes at impossible speed, leaving no trace. Around 3:30 a.m., RAPCON vectors to B-52, another target, a stationary glowing object near November Flight's missile field. Pilots see a huge, pulsating craft on or near the ground, hundreds of feet across, luminous and silent. Minutes later, as the bomber lands, alarms blare at Oscar 7 missile site. Outer and inner zones breached. Security forces rush in, find no intruders, but the air vibrates with static and residual charge. The entire encounter lasts over 3 hours, documented in real time by radar, radio, and multiple eyewitnesses. Dawn reveals no trace of the craft, but all data radar logs, scope films, and communication tapes are seized by investigators. OSI debriefs all personnel under oath and seals the files as secret, forwarding them to Strategic Air Command. Project Blue Book conducts a review, but despite clear radar and visual evidence, the official verdict claims stus and temperature inversion. Radar tapes are archived without proper study. Eyewitness reports are redacted and minimized. Those who were there, no otherwise trained personnel, all confirming the same event, the same details, the same impossible maneuvers. B-52 crew later testified that the craft's acceleration exceeded Mach 3, far beyond any known US or Soviet capability. Dr. J. Allen Heinecke and Jacques Vallée both reviewed the case, calling it one of the strongest on record for radar-visual correlation. The minute incident stands apart for its consistency, radar, visual, and physical systems, all confirming a single unknown presence over nuclear ground. In the years that follow, similar events occur across the Great Plains and northern states. At F.E. Warren AFB in Wyoming, glowing lights hover over missile fields, tracked by radar during 1965 and 1966. Guards describe hovering discs with red and white lights that silently float above silos, then accelerate vertically. Radio systems experience EMP logs note simultaneous signal drops across several sites. In Montana, 1967, a red orb disables 10 ICBMs at Malmstrom. AFB missiles shut down instantly. No mechanical fault found. 2 years later, new reports emerge, silent orbs drifting near silo perimeters, moving intelligently during maintenance drills. Launch offices describe the lights mapping the site, dipping low, then shooting skyward, causing power anomalies. Across Canada, RCAF radar stations. Near Coal Lake record fast-moving targets in restricted airspace. One object, shaped like a tube of light, moves at 1,500 miles per hour, climbs to 80,000 feet, and vanishes. Pilots confirm visual contact, a pulsating orange light pacing them, seen from both air and ground. Declassified Canadian memos quietly list for such encounters during the 1967 wave, all near nuclear-linked operations. The pattern is unmistakable. These phenomena consistently appear near nuclear sites, missile silos and bomber ranges. Incidents often align with readiness drills or weapons maintenance, as if tracking nuclear activity in real time. Researcher Robert Hastings documents dozens of these testimonies in his work, UFOs and Nukes, identifying an intentional pattern. Each sighting suggests observation, precise, methodical, and aware of human weapon systems. Official reports continue to dismiss them as natural or atmospheric, even when multiple radars confirm the targets. Officers like Captain James Pavitt later speak out, stating these were solid radar contacts, not illusions. No evidence ever links these intrusions to the Soviets or any known aircraft technology. Intelligence intercepts, defector reports, and reconnaissance all confirm it wasn't foreign. Some speculate experimental US programs, but no records match the times, locations, or behavior. Strategic Air Command memos refer vaguely to unfriendly incursions, heavily redacted beyond that. The Minute case becomes a benchmark, used in congressional and public hearings decades later. Retired Air Force officers describe it as one of the most credible military UFO cases ever documented. Even Pentagon UAP reports from 2021 echo the same unresolved pattern. Unknown aerial objects near nuclear installations. The Cold War may have ended, but the mystery remains. Quietly repeating through the decades, drones and satellites now patrol the same skies where Bond once stood staring upward, transfixed. The weapons have evolved, but the watchers seem unchanged, silent, precise, and endlessly curious. Those who witnessed that night remember one truth: something entered restricted airspace over a nuclear base, hovered, observed, and vanished. The event left no physical wreckage, only data, testimonies, and a haunting question that endures. Who watches the watchers? And why do they linger where humanity's power to destroy begins? The open ocean is a place of exposure, a realm without shelter, where horizon and sky merge into a single, endless line. Here, sound carries far, and silence carries farther. In this vast expanse, the aircraft carrier USS Franklin D. Roosevelt sailed as a floating fortress, a giant of the Cold War. Commissioned in 1945, she was a midway-class carrier, nearly 1,000 feet of steel and power. To her crew, she was Rosie, a home, a weapon, and a watchtower at sea. She carried fighter jets, reconnaissance aircraft, and sometimes nuclear weapons. From the chill of the North Atlantic to the warmth of the Caribbean, she patrolled in silence, her radar scanning the skies, her crew alert to every blip, every echo. The Roosevelt embodied strength, yet between the 1950s and 70s, she became something else. A witness to things that should not have been there. The first encounter came in 1950. It was late evening on calm water. Several sailors on deck noticed a bright, disc-shaped object hovering above the sea. It glowed white against the dark horizon, unmoving, silent. Then, without warning, it darted upward and vanished. Officers dismissed it as reflection, perhaps the moon on the waves, or a trick of temperature layers. But the sailors who saw it knew what reflections looked like, and this was not one of them. 6 years later, in 1958, the Roosevelt joined NATO maneuvers off Portugal's coast. During the exercise, radar screens lit up with a solid return. Something large, close, and moving slowly near the port side. Lookouts spotted a bluish object hanging in the sky, motionless. No sound, no exhaust, no explanation. 4 or 5 long minutes. It hovered beside the carrier before shooting upward at an impossible angle and vanishing. Radar confirmed the contact. The ship's log noted unidentified aerial object. Then the record stopped there. The crew was told to keep quiet. 4 years later, the ocean fell silent again. In 1962, near Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, a metallic sphere appeared alongside the carrier group. It moved parallel to the ships, gleaming silver under the Caribbean sun. A Navy photographer snapped several frames before the object accelerated and disappeared. When the film was developed, intelligence officers confiscated the negatives. The photographer was ordered to speak of it to no one. Rumors spread that the images showed a structured craft, clear, defined, unmistakable, but they never Not all the witnesses were young sailors. In 1973, Marine Major George A. Filer III, an intelligence officer aboard the Roosevelt, documented one of the most compelling cases. 2 pilots, on a night flight, reported a glowing, elongated craft pacing their jet. As they closed in, their navigation and communication systems flickered, then failed. The object stayed beside them, effortlessly keeping pace, before shooting off into the night sky. When the pilots landed, they were questioned, and Filer filed a report. Within hours, visiting intelligence officers classified the document and removed it from the ship's records. The incident was never officially acknowledged again. Through the decades, patterns emerged. The witnesses were consistent, experienced sailors, radar operators, and officers, describing the same shapes, disks, spheres, elongated craft. They glowed in colors from white to blue-green, often hovering or mirroring the ship's movement. Some incidents came with electronic interference, radar screens freezing, radios dying, navigation displays flickering. These were not vague lights on the horizon. They were tangible, tracked, and verified. Before being erased from the official story, the Roosevelt's possible nuclear payload added a deeper tension, though rarely admitted publicly. Carriers of her class could carry atomic weapons for deployment by aircraft or rockets, and time and again, sightings seemed to occur when nuclear arms were nearby, echoing the patterns from missile bases in Montana and test sites in Nevada. Other carriers, like the USS Coral Sea and USS Saratoga, recorded similar anomalies, but the Roosevelt's record was unmatched in frequency and detail. The ocean itself made these encounters harder to dismiss. Unlike land-based sightings, there were no civilian eyes to confuse or exaggerate. Only trained personnel, radar readings, and military logs. False positives were always possible. Mirages, weather echoes, sensor noise, but the Roosevelt's incidents involved multiple witnesses, cross-check data, and equipment disruptions that defied coincidence. Still, the Navy remained silent. Officially, there were no explanations, no statements, no public reports. Some say the silence was strategic, admitting that unidentified objects could operate freely near a nuclear-armed carrier would reveal vulnerability. Others believe investigations took place in secret. But when no answers emerged, the easiest decision was suppression. Decades later, as the Roosevelt was decommissioned in 1977, her crew scattered across the country. Some stayed silent forever. Others, in retirement, began to talk. At reunions and in interviews, they shared calm, factual recollections. Not sensational, just clear. A radar operator from the Portugal sighting described the object playing with us, matching our speed and course. A deckhand from the Guantanamo encounter recalled its metallic sheen, like polished chrome, moving without a sound. Major Filer, speaking years later, he insisted the pilots who reported these events were some of the most disciplined and credible professionals he'd ever known. Their stories aligned. Objects that watched, hovered, mirrored, and then disappeared, always without trace, always followed by silence. Freedom of Information Act requests later uncovered fragments of the Roosevelt's operational records entries, noting unidentified aerial contacts, but redacted into ambiguity. The Navy's 2019 acknowledgement of modern UAP encounters from ships like the USS Nimitz and USS Theodore Roosevelt reignited attention. But the Franklin D. Roosevelt's history remained largely untouched, its mysteries sealed beneath decades of classified ink. The question that lingers is not just what these objects were, but why they came. Were they drawn by nuclear energy? By power itself? Were they reconnaissance by an intelligence we do not recognize? Or were they something far stranger, a phenomenon beyond comprehension, watching from the quiet above the sea? For those who served aboard her, the memories remain vivid. The hum of engines, the salt wind, the faint glow of something impossible on the horizon. Moments that broke the monotony of patrols and replaced certainty with wonder. The Roosevelt may be gone now, scrapped, her steel dispersed, her decks silent. But her story endures as a whisper in naval history of lights above the waves, of silenced after the sightings, and of questions that outlived the ship itself. Because in the end, the greatest sound over the sea is not the roar of engines or the crash of waves, but the silence that follows when something unknown has passed. The story of unidentified aerial phenomena is often told through a Western lens filled with Pentagon reports, radar logs, and the testimonies of American military personnel. But across the Iron Curtain, within the secretive heart of the Soviet Union, another story unfolded, one shrouded in censorship, fear, and silence. Behind the walls of propaganda and state control, Soviet scientists and soldiers encountered the same impossible visitors, glowing objects that appeared over their most sensitive nuclear sites. For decades, these stories remained buried, hidden under Cold War paranoia. Only after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 did fragments of this hidden history begin to surface, and what they revealed was a pattern that mirrored the West with eerie precision. The Soviet Union stretched across 11 time zones. Its nuclear arsenal rivaled America's intercontinental missiles, submarine warheads, and strategic bombers, all poised for global destruction. These weapons were housed in fortified bases, guarded by secrecy and fear. Any talk of strange phenomena was forbidden. To question, or even to notice, could mean punishment. Yet, inside classified archives, reports began to pile up. Objects seen above missile silos, glowing discs over submarine pens, radar anomalies that no one could explain. And among them, one incident stood out. October 4th, 1982, a missile base near Belosisky, in northern Ukraine. The base housed R-1 Debina missiles, each capable of carrying a 1 megaton nuclear warhead. That night, under a clear sky, guards saw a massive disc-shaped object hovering silently above the base. It glowed faintly, almost like heat lightning, but it did not move. Then, chaos erupted. Inside the control bunker, launch consoles came to life on their own. Indicator lights flashed. Countdowns began. Systems prepared to fire. For 15 seconds, the Soviet Union stood on the edge of nuclear disaster. Then, just as suddenly, everything stopped. The consoles went dark. The lights died. The object above the base rose into the clouds and disappeared. Within hours, Moscow sent investigators, engineers, generals, and KGB officers. Their official conclusion: a technical malfunction. But the R-12 launch system was built with multiple safeguards. It required 2 officers, 2 keys, and manual confirmation to fire. No faults were found. No power surges. No explanation. Years later, Lieutenant Colonel Vladimir Plantikov broke his silence. He said quietly, it was as if something reached into the system and took control. It wasn't the only time. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, similar reports came from bases across the Soviet Union. Declassified fragments described glowing orbs, triangular craft, and discs that hovered over missile silos. In 1977, radar operators at a site near Krasnoyarsk tracked a formation of triangular objects moving in perfect coordination. They flew at 20,000 feet, then accelerated to more than 3,000 miles per hour. Far beyond the reach of any Soviet or Western aircraft. The radar tapes were seized. The incident was erased from official records. At sea, the Soviet Navy met its own mysteries. In 1984, a Typhoon-class submarine patrolling the Barents Sea detected an underwater object moving faster than any submarine on Earth, over 150 knots. It followed the Typhoon for several minutes, then dove into the deep, vanishing beyond sonar range. Intelligence officers compared data from Western sources. No US or NATO craft could match such speed. The report was classified, filed, and forgotten. The Soviet response to these encounters was methodical and secretive. In the late 1960s, the Ministry of Defense created small, covert teams to study the phenomenon. One was led by Dr. Felix Ziegel, an astronomer and defense consultant at the Moscow Aviation Institute. His researchers studied hundreds of Cas-many clustered near nuclear facilities and command centers. In 1975, Ziegel presented his findings to the Academy of Sciences, suggesting that some objects might be of non-terrestrial origin. The report was immediately suppressed. Ziegel's work was labeled politically dangerous, an embarrassment to the state. Still, he continued in secret, exchanging information quietly with trusted officers until his death in The KGB, meanwhile, watched closely. Declassified documents later revealed that the agency maintained a special unit dedicated to tracking what it called anomalous atmospheric phenomena. To them, these sightings were not science fiction, they were potential threats. If the objects represented advanced American or Chinese technology, they could tip the balance of power. KGB analysts studied U.S. cases like Roswell, the Malmstrom missile shutdowns, and the minute Air Force Base sightings, gathering data through espionage and intercepted communications. A 1981 KGB memo described unidentified objects demonstrating capabilities beyond known human engineering, including the ability to interfere with nuclear command systems. That fear led to new experiments. The military began studying electromagnetic disturbances at missile sites, particularly after UAP encounters. A 1983 report from the Kapustin Yar test range documented repeated radar and guidance failures following low-altitude flyovers by glowing objects. The systems were triple redundant, hardened against sabotage and EMP attacks. Yet, each time the lights appeared, the equipment failed, and each time the reports disappeared into classified archives. Officially, skeptics blamed power fluctuations or operator error, but those excuses rang hollow. Nuclear launch systems were among the most secure and rigorously tested on Earth. Too many incidents matched too closely. A 1980 internal memo from Soviet Air Defense acknowledged that unknown objects had been tracked at multiple sites, performing maneuvers that defied aerodynamic principles. The report recommended increased monitoring, but avoided any theory of origin. Then came Glasnost, the policy of openness, under Mikhail Gorbachev. For the first time, the Soviet press began to whisper about the phenomenon. Newspapers like Pravda and Izvestia published cautious stories about unidentified aerial craft seen near military installations. One 1989 article described reconnaissance vehicles of unknown origin near missile bases, though it avoided any mention of extraterrestrial life. Even then, the language was careful, sanitized, fearful of revealing too much. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the dam finally broke. Researchers and journalists began to dig into the past. Declassified records, long-buried photographs, and first-hand testimonies poured out. Groups like the Russian Ufology Research Center gathered hundreds of cassette stories of discs over silos, of phantom countdowns, of radar echoes that moved like intelligent craft. Freed from fear, witnesses began to speak. A radar operator from the 1977 Krasnoyarsk incident described the formation as moving like a single organism. A submarine from the Barents Sea encounter said simply, "It was faster than physics allows." These accounts, though little known in the West, mirror what American forces experienced. From Montana to Moscow, from the deserts of New Mexico to the ice of the Arctic, the pattern is unmistakable. Objects drawn to nuclear power. Objects capable of interfering with systems built to prevent human error and, perhaps, human extinction. The Soviet experience reveals something profound. Even in a regime defined by control, surveillance, and secrecy, there were moments when the unknown slipped through. Moments when human power, nuclear, absolute, and terrifying, was met by something greater. Something that could watch, intervene, and then vanish without a trace. Today, those reports remain one of the Cold War's quietest mysteries, but their message endures. If something beyond us can observe, disable, or even command the most destructive weapons ever made, then our understanding of power and of our place in the universe may be far smaller than we once believed. In the final days of December 1980, a quiet corner of Suffolk, England, became the stage for one of the most remarkable UFO encounters in modern history. The Rendlesham Forest incident, later called Britain's Roswell, unfolded near two American-operated air bases, RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge. Unlike rumors or civilian sightings, this event involved trained military personnel, physical evidence, audio recordings, and official reports. And it happened beside a NATO base storing the largest stockpile of tactical nuclear weapons in Europe. Whatever took place that winter would challenge not only witnesses but the boundaries of military certainty. Bentwaters and Woodbridge sat 3 miles apart in the Suffolk countryside, run by the U.S. Air Force's 81st Tactical Fighter Wing. Behind the fences, a 10 Thunderbolt aircraft stood ready, along with B-61 nuclear bombs, though their existence was officially denied. Thick forest surrounded the bases, creating a natural wall of secrecy. It was a tense period of the Cold War. Every radar contact mattered. Every shadow was a potential threat. Just after midnight on December 26th, base security personnel saw strange lights descending into Rendlesham Forest. Assuming a crash, perhaps a civilian plane or one of their own, Sergeant Jim Peniston, an airman first class, John Burroughs, went out to investigate. What they found defied explanation. Resting silently on the forest floor was a small triangular craft about 9 feet wide, 6 feet tall, emitting a soft, multicolored glow. There was no sound, no exhaust, no movement of air. Peniston approached, drawn by curiosity and training. The surface of the object felt warm, smooth, metallic, etched with strange glyph-like markings, symbols that looked almost ancient. He traced them with his hand, memorized their shape, and later sketched them in his notebook. Moments later, the craft lifted gently through the trees, brushing branches aside before shooting upward into the night sky, gone in an instant. The following morning, investigators examined the landing site. They found 3 triangular indentations in the soil, forming a perfect equilateral pattern. Nearby trees bore scorch marks and broken limbs. Radiation readings, taken with a Geiger counter, were higher than normal. Plaster casts were made of the indentations. Photographs documented the scene. It was hard evidence, something rare in cases like this. The findings were quietly filed up the chain of command, but the lights returned. 2 nights later, on December 28, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, the deputy base commandant, decided to see for himself. Intent on debunking the rumors, he led a small team into the forest, equipped with radios, a Geiger counter, and a small tape recorder. That recording, later known as the Halt tape, captured a moment of real-time confusion, AW, and fear. Holt's voice is steady at first as he describes red and white lights moving through the truss, pulsing, weaving, behaving as though under intelligent control. Then, his tone shifts. He describes a glowing object hovering at treetop height, sending a beam of light down to the ground straight toward the weapons storage area at Ben. "It's coming this way now. This is unreal," he says, his composure slipping. The encounter lasted hours. Multiple lights appeared and vanished. Radar operators at both Bentwaters and nearby RAF Wotton reported unidentified returns, objects that came and went faster than aircraft could move. Even civilians in nearby villages saw strange lights in the same direction. On January 13th, 1981, Colonel Holt submitted a formal memorandum to the British Ministry of Defence, now known simply as the Holt Memo. It detailed the events, the triangular markings, the radiation readings, and the returning lights. It offered no theories, only facts. The ministry replied that the incident posed no threat to national security. But internal documents later revealed quiet concern. Officials privately discussed possible breaches of security, especially disturbing given the nuclear warheads stored nearby. Over the following years, witnesses faced pressure to stay silent. Holt later said radar logs and photographs disappeared from the record. He was advised not to speak publicly. Peniston and Burroughs, both of whom suffered health issues they linked to radiation exposure, were debriefed and warned to remain quiet. Still, the story leaked. Local reporters picked it up, and researchers began digging. In 2000, Georgina Bruni's book, You Can't Tell the People, exposed hidden Ministry of Defense interest. Nick Pope, who ran the MOD's UFO desk in the 1990s, called Rendlesham, the UK's Roswell, credible, well-documented, and impossible to dismiss. What made this case different was the evidence. The holotape. The official memo. Physical traces on the ground. Radiation readings. Multiple radar contacts, and the testimony of trained military personnel, all telling the same story. More witnesses stepped forward over the years. Sergeant Larry Warren described seeing a similar craft in bright beams. During the first night, Airman Adrian Bustinza confirmed a beam directed toward the weapons area. In 2010, Holt Peniston and others held a press conference in Washington, D.C., calling for full disclosure. They linked Rendlesham to a wider pattern UAPs near nuclear sites in both the US and the Soviet Union. Skeptics argued that the lights came from the Arford Ness Lighthouse, whose beam occasionally cut through the forest. But Holt and others dismissed this explanation. The lights they saw moved erratically, split into multiple orbs, and projected beams downward. No lighthouse could do that. Some suggested experimental aircraft or secret tests, yet no known technology in 1980 could silently hover, accelerate vertically, or emit focused beams. Even decades later, official files never produced a definitive answer. The connection to the nuclear weapons remains the most unsettling detail. Bentwater's storage bunkers held the heart of NATO's atomic arsenal. If beams of light truly targeted that area, the implication is chilling. Something unknown interacted with the world's most secure and destructive systems. Colonel Holt, now retired, has repeated his testimony for over 40 years. In a sworn affidavit, he wrote that the craft was under intelligent control and that the event exposed vulnerabilities in NATO defenses. Peniston went further, claiming that the glyphs he saw encoded a binary message coordinates and a cryptic warning, though many researchers remain skeptical. Today, Rendlesham Forest is quiet. A tourist trail marks the landing site, with a small plaque referring to an unexplained event. No wreckage was ever found, but the traces remain: the tape, the memo, the plaster casts, and the words of those who were there. For the men on duty that night, it was not myth or imagination. It was a moment when the unknown stepped into the heart of nuclear defense, observed, interacted, and vanished. Whether the craft came from another world, another dimension, or from human technology beyond public knowledge, it left a lasting scar. The Bentwaters Woodbridge incident is more than a UFO story. It is a reminder of how fragile control can be, even for those who guard the world's most powerful weapons. And for the witnesses who stood beneath the silent lights of Rendlesham Forest, the question still lingers. What visited that night, ... and why? Throughout much of the 20th century, reports of unidentified aerial phenomena, often dismissed as myths or misidentifications, were largely confined to the United States and the Soviet Union. These superpowers, locked in the Cold War, developed immense nuclear arsenals, and it was near their most secretive facilities that strange aerial encounters were most often reported. But as nuclear technologies spread beyond these rivals, driven by decolonization, power shifts, and the pursuit of deterrence, similar sightings began to emerge in other corners of the world, from Israel's Negev desert to the humid coasts of southern India, to China's vast and isolated test sites. Witnesses described the same impossible craft, silent, structured, and defying the laws of physics, appearing near humanity's deadliest creations, nuclear weapons designed to enforce national power and independence, seemed to attract attention that transcended every border and ideology. Yet in nations where secrecy is paramount and discussion of military projects is forbidden, these incidents rarely reached public ears. They stayed buried in classified logs, whispered among personnel, or erased entirely until fragments resurfaced through leaks and declassified archives. When pieced together, they told a remarkable story. The phenomenon was global. It operated without regard for language, government, or geography, suggesting either a coordinated surveillance effort by some unknown intelligence, or a natural force drawn inexplicably to the pulse of atomic energy. Israel, India, and China each built their nuclear programs under immense pressure, each with its own veil of secrecy. Israel pursued its arsenal in the 1950s with French support, maintaining deliberate ambiguity ever since. India detonated its first bomb in 1974, then again in 1998, entering the nuclear club outside the Non-Proliferation Treaty. China, with Soviet aid, joined that same club in 1964. In time, amassed hundreds of warheads, and wherever nuclear ambition took root, something seemed to take notice. In the late 1970s, strange objects appeared above Israel's Negev desert, near the Dimona facility, the heart of its undeclared nuclear program. Radar operators detected erratic blips. Pilots were scrambled. Witnesses described a glowing, metallic craft hovering in silence over the reactor complex. One of the most striking accounts came in 1981. A bluish disk appeared above Dimona at midday. Hovering motionless, its surface shimmered, yet cast no shadow. Then, without sound or trail, it accelerated straight upward, vanishing into the clear sky. Radar data confirmed an unidentified target moving faster than any aircraft known to Israel at the time. No statement was made. No photographs released. Only quiet security upgrades followed. In 2010, decades later, Israeli jets were again scrambled toward Dimona after radar detected an unidentified intruder from the Dead Sea region. Officials later called it a balloon, but early reports described it as a glowing sphere. 2 years later, a Hezbollah drone was shot down in the same area, and in recent years, as tensions rose, pilots once again reported fast-moving, luminous objects near nuclear airspace beyond any known drone capability. Thousands of miles away, a similar story unfolded along India's southern coast. The Kalpakkam nuclear power plant, one of the nation's most sensitive sites, became the focus of recurring sightings. In 2004, just after the Indian Ocean tsunami, witnesses reported a rotating, disc-shaped object hovering silently over the facility before fading into the night sky. Plant workers, fishermen, and security guards saw it. Later accounts revealed it wasn't the first time. Unexplained aerial intrusions had occurred at least 3 times before, often during reactor maintenance or fuel handling operations. By 2023, these reports intensified. Police officials near Kalpakkam and Kudankulam described zigzagging lights that defied all known flight patterns. Jets were scrambled, videos captured, yet no explanation followed. Authorities attributed them to civilian drones or optical illusions, but the timing coinciding with India's reactor expansions raised deeper questions. Meanwhile, farther north, China's encounters remained cloaked in even greater secrecy. Its first atomic test in 1964 marked the start of a long, silent chain of UAP activities, especially near Lopner, the country's main testing ground. There, nomads and soldiers alike have described glowing orbs drifting above the desert, their movements deliberate, intelligent. In 2009, near the Leshan nuclear complex in Sichuan province, residents filmed a cigar-shaped craft hovering for 10 minutes before streaking away. The footage went viral. 10 bunnies had scrubbed from Chinese social media. Soon after, users who shared it disappeared from public view. Unofficial sources later claimed the military had scrambled aircraft to intercept the object, but it outran them easily. Reports from the remote deserts of Xinjiang tell similar tales. Luminous triangles and orbs appearing after midnight, tracking across the horizon before dissolving into darkness. Satellite imagery even captured unexplained light bursts over restricted areas never publicly acknowledged, but noted by foreign analysts. In 2012, a censored academic paper briefly mentioned unexplained aerial phenomena detected during sensitive operations. Though phrased cautiously, it confirmed what witnesses had long claimed. These incursions were tracked on radar and interfered with electronics. By the 2010s, UAP disruptions became public for the first time. In 2010, 2 major Chinese airports were forced to shut down as unidentified objects hovered above runways. Officials cited airspace violations, but witnesses described glowing forms, stationary and silent. It was the first visible crack in China's wall of denial. Across these nations, the same traits repeated. Objects with impossible agility, instant acceleration, and total silence. Timed appearances during nuclear milestones, tests, expansions, creases, credible witnesses, pilots, soldiers, scientists, and the same official reaction. Denial, redirection, or quiet classification. What connects them all is not just mystery but intent. These objects appear drawn to the very places humanity stores its power to destroy itself. They observe, they monitor, but they do not engage. Perhaps they are the eyes of rival powers, testing boundaries with technologies the world has yet to see. Perhaps they are natural phenomena we still fail to comprehend. Or perhaps they're something else entirely. Whatever the truth, one fact remains undeniable. As humanity's nuclear reach expands from Israel's guarded arsenals to India's rising reactors to China's silent desert, something is watching. It does not speak. It does not attack. It only observes from just beyond our understanding. And in that quiet, unblinking observation lies a question we still cannot answer. Are we alone in the universe, or simply not as alone as we think? In the architecture of nuclear command and control, redundancy reigns supreme. Every component from launch authorization to missile readiness is fortified by layers of safeguards, backups, and protections built to withstand sabotage, cyber attacks, or even direct assault. Yet, across decades and superpowers, an unseen force has repeatedly pierced these defenses silently, precisely, and without leaving a trace. It does not destroy. It disrupts, temporarily, but deliberately. A haunting pattern emerges: nuclear missile systems suddenly going offline or malfunctioning in the presence of unidentified aerial phenomena UAP. Once dismissed as coincidence, these incidents form a consistent, global tapestry. They suggest an intelligence capable of manipulating humanity's most secure technologies, leaving behind no fingerprints but profound questions. It began during the Cold War. On March 16, 1967, at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, Captain Robert Salas sat deep underground, monitoring 10 Minuteman I intercontinental ballistic missiles. Above ground, guards reported a glowing orange object hovering over the missile site, pulsating, stationary. Moments later, alarms erupted. One by one, each missile dropped from alert to no-go. Offline dead, no surge, no mechanical failure, no sabotage. Boeing engineers could find no cause. The sequence had unfolded as if remotely commanded. 6 months earlier, another incident struck a Echo flight, shutting down 10 more missiles amid reports of strange lights in the sky. Lieutenant Robert Jamison, part of the recovery team, recalled security alerts about UFOs near the silos. Air Force logs later confirmed an unidentified noise pulse had bypassed hardened protections. In Al-Fayed, 20 nuclear weapons capable of annihilation were disabled, each correlated with aerial anomalies no one could explain. By the mid-70s, similar patterns appeared at other nuclear installations. At Loring Air Force Base in Maine, from late October through early November 1970, radar tracked unidentified craft descending over the nuclear weapons storage area. Security teams saw a helicopter-like object with multicolored lights, but it emitted no sound, evaded pursuit, and vanished without trace. Strategic Air Command raised alerts, suspecting espionage. Yet the craft's movements defied known technology in stint turns, impossible speeds, and total silence. That same season, bases at Malmstrom and Minot in Montana and North Dakota reported parallel incursions. At Minot, radar detected luminous objects hovering over missile sites, while crews on the ground saw glowing orbs pacing a B-52 bomber returning from a training mission. One missile briefly dropped offline. Retired Captain David Schindel later revealed his own facility experienced a full shutdown of 10 missiles during UAP activity, but Ayad Ben ordered to remain silent. Official logs and affidavits confirmed the same traits: structured craft, silent flight, radar evasion, and selective interference with nuclear systems. Further west, at F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming, 1979, brought fresh encounters. Officers reported disc-shaped craft maneuvering over missile fields, tracked by radar at low altitude, performing sharp, deliberate turns above silos. The missiles stayed active, but the events were recorded and classified. A former commander described them as unacknowledged intrusions with unknown intent. The pattern, stretching from the 60s through the late 70s, reflected a vulnerability no nation dared to admit. UAP could approach and influence nuclear systems once thought untouchable. The most chilling case came from the other side of the Iron Curtain. On October 4th, 1982, near Belokorovichi in Ukraine, a massive glowing sphere 300 meters wide hovered above a Soviet missile complex. Witnesses described beams of light scanning the silos. Then, deep underground, control panels flickered to life. Without human input, missile launch sequences initiated counting down autonomously. For 15 seconds, nuclear warheads armed themselves for launch. And then, as suddenly as it began, everything shut down. Systems reset. The object departed. No evidence of interference, no mechanical fault. For the first time, UAP activity had triggered activation, not deactivation, a near disaster, only seconds from catastrophe. When Cold War archives opened in the 1990s, retired officers from both nations once. Enemies confirmed parallel stories. Researchers like Robert Hastings compiled over 150 incidents worldwide. Each shared the same pattern. They occurred near active nuclear sites. They involved structured craft, observed visually. And on radar, they induced brief but complete malfunctions, and they left no lasting damage. The technology required to remotely manipulate these isolated, shielded systems did not exist then or now. The behavior was deliberate, observant, controlled. No communication, no attack. Just silent interference, as if to demonstrate capability or deliver a warning. Some analysts believed it was advanced reconnaissance, showcasing dominance. Others suspected a higher intelligence neither American nor Soviet. The one power humanity was never meant to wield. In September 2010, 7 retired U.S. Air Force officers, including Silas and Colonel Charles Halt, spoke publicly at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. They described these UAP-induced disruptions in sworn statements, calling for These events form a pattern, they said, and that pattern carries grave implications for global security. Their plea was ignored. Records remained redacted or missing. Witnesses recalled investigators arriving within hours, seizing data, enforcing silence. Still, the accounts continued, from the plains of Montana to the deserts of Kazakhstan, from America's missile wings to Russia's launch fields. The same narrative repeated, and as the world entered the 21st century, the pattern did not fade, it evolved. The Pentagon's Al-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, in its 2024 annual report, logged 757 UAP incidents, including 80 near U.S. nuclear sites. 10 involved coordinated swarms of 5 or more craft. In November 2024, new data pinpointed repeated activity over restricted zones. 21 cases remained unexplained after analysis. By mid-2020-5, fresh disclosures from the National Archives reignited the issue. Journalists and military witnesses revisited the Soviet incident, warning that these incursions compromised the foundation of nuclear deterrence. Absolute control. Other nations joined the record. Japan's self-defense forces reported zigzagging lights near nuclear plants. Unverified accounts surfaced from India's Pokhran test range and China's Lop Nur, proving grounds both describing luminous objects hovering over warhead storage areas before vanishing into the night. In July 2025, a U.S. jet crashed near a nuclear facility during a reported UAP encounter, sparking new investigations. These intrusions are not folklore. They are logged by radar, tracked by instruments, and witnessed by professionals within the most secure perimeters on Earth. Their implications cut deeper than curiosities. They strike at the core of civilization's balance of terror. Something beyond our comprehension can reach into our silos and command center. It can switch off our missiles, or almost launch them, with precision no adversary has ever demonstrated. Whether this is a test of our resolve, a warning against destruction, or a watchful oversight from forces unknown, one truth stands unshakable. In the shadow of mutual annihilation, we are not the only ones watching. For decades, governments worldwide offered simple answers for unidentified aerial phenomena. They said these were misidentified aircraft, weather balloons, natural events, or classified experiments. Nothing alarming. Nothing to see here. But behind those closed doors, another story was quietly unfolding, one built from declassified files, insider testimonies, and Freedom of Information Act releases. Back in the late 1940s, as the Cold War dawned, the U.S. Air Force launched its first major UFO investigation, Project Sign, that evolved into Project Grudge, and finally, into the most famous of them all, Project Blue Book. Officially, Blue Book began in 1952 with a clear mission: determine if UFOs were a threat to national security. By the time it ended in 1969, the project had reviewed more than 12,000 reports. Most were said to have simple explanations: aircraft lights, planets, reflections, or weather balloons. But over 700 cases remained, completely unexplained. And within those internal documents, the story was far less comforting. One example stood out: the 1965 Wurtsmith Air Force Base incident in Michigan. Personnel there tracked a glowing object hovering near a nuclear weapons storage area. Project Blue Book labeled it insufficient data. Yet a later declassified memo described the object's movements as far beyond any known aircraft. It became clear that Blue Book wasn't Ihoost research, it was reassurance. A program designed as much to calm the public as to find the truth. Even Dr. J. Allen Hynek, Blue Book's scientific consultant, admitted years later that many cases were dismissed far too quickly. Ironically, Hynek became one of the most respected civilian UFO researchers, openly critical of the very project he once defended. When Blue Book ended, the sightings didn't, and neither did the paper trail. By the 19th, researchers began digging into the archives using the Freedom of Information Act. What they uncovered painted a darker, more complex picture. Documents revealed that unidentified craft had repeatedly appeared near sensitive military and nuclear sites, missile silos, submarine bases, and atomic labs. Many of these files were heavily redacted, but what remained was enough to show one thing: the military took these encounters very seriously. A 1975 NORAD memo described repeated incursions by unknown aerial craft over nuclear bases across the northern United States. Fighter jets were launched, but never made contact. The memo called them unidentified helicopters, yet witnesses and radar told a different story. No sound, high speed, and the ability to hover silently for long periods. That wasn't any helicopter on Earth. Another striking case emerged from Kirtland Air Force Base in 1976. Glowing objects were seen near the Manzano weapons storage area, one of America's most secure nuclear facilities. The report included timing logs, light analyses, and even hand-drawn diagrams. Its conclusion: no known aircraft or atmospheric condition can explain these events. These files carried top-level clearance codes, the same as nuclear secrets. And yet, the official response was always the same: acknowledge the incident, file it, Hawaii, move on. By the early 2000s, public curiosity about UFOs had faded. But inside the Pentagon, interest was quietly rekindled. In 2017, journalists exposed a secret Defense Department initiative called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AATIP. It ran from 2007 to 2012, funded with $22 million in black budget money. Its mission: investigate encounters involving unidentified aerial objects, especially near sensitive military sites. AATIP analyzed dozens of incidents, some directly tied to nuclear areas. These craft were described as moving at impossible speeds, accelerating instantly, and hovering without sound or visible propulsion. One AATIP scientist, Dr. Alputov, claimed the program had studied exotic metamaterials, alleged fragments of unknown origin. Unproven, yes, but it reignited a burning question: how much does the government really know? Then came the turning point. Between 2020 and 2021, the U.S. Department of Defense officially released several Navy videos, real footage showing objects performing maneuvers no human aircraft could achieve. The Pentagon didn't call them UFOs anymore. The release triggered congressional hearings and forced intelligence agencies to investigate. In June 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a landmark report. It reviewed 144 military UAP cases between 2004 and 2021. The rest, 143 cases, remained unresolved, though the report made no direct mention of nuclear connections. Later testimony hinted otherwise. When asked if UAPs had been observed near nuclear sites, officials paused and quietly answered yes. Still, official reports tell only fragments of the truth. For every declassified page, there are countless others, locked away, redacted, hidden, or destroyed. And perhaps the most revealing documents are the ones that were never meant to be seen at all. Handwritten notes from radar operators, a guard scribbling. Object hovered over silo, no sound. A radar technician writing. Target moved erratically. A debrief officer concluding. Witnesses credible, no explanation offered. These weren't reports written for the press or for history books. They were raw human reactions. Real people confronting something they couldn't explain. Moments of fear, awe, and confusion. Moments that vanished into classified files and storage rooms, buried under layers of bureaucracy. And yet, together, these fragments form a consistent pattern. Something persistent, intelligent, and uninvited. Something that has lingered near humanity's most destructive creations. Lights over silos. Systems going dark. Objects observing, but never engaging. The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. These encounters aren't random. The files they didn't want opened tell a chilling story. Not of answers, but of patterns. Patterns stretching from the Cold War to the present. Patterns of interference with nuclear weapons. Patterns of silence from the highest levels of government. And patterns of witnesses, soldiers, pilots, technicians, who all describe the same thing. A presence watching from above, beyond human technology, beyond human understanding. Even today, some of these witnesses are still bound by secrecy agreements. Others have spoken carefully, cautiously, describing power systems that shut down as unknown craft hovered overhead. Guidance computers frozen. Launch codes erased. Then, just as suddenly, everything returning to normal. The question isn't whether something was seen. The question is why and by whom. Were these demonstrations, warnings, or simply the byproduct of something that has always been here, moving just beyond the edge of human control? Decades of documents, testimony, and declassified evidence all point to one conclusion. Something intelligent has taken an interest in our most powerful weapons, whether it's extraterrestrial, interdimensional, or human technology still hidden from the world. No one can say for sure. But one thing is certain, the mystery didn't end with Project Blue Book. It continues in classified reports, in modern radar tracks, and in whispered briefings between nations. Because the files they never wanted opened were never really closed. Chapter 10. Eyewitnesses in uniform for most of their service. They stayed silent, bound by security oaths, duty, and the fear of ridicule. They kept their experiences locked away behind the walls of military secrecy, but over time after retirement and reflection. A number of respected service members began to speak out. These were not conspiracy theorists or attention seekers. They were trained professionals, radar operators, missile technicians, pilots, and base commanders, people accustomed to reporting only what they could confirm. And their testimonies, calm and consistent, told of encounters that defied conventional explanation. Many of their stories shared a troubling common thread: nuclear weapons. One of the first to step forward was Captain Robert Salas, a U.S. Air Force missile launch officer stationed at Air Force Base in 1967. While on duty in the Underground Launch Control Center, the missiles under his command suddenly went offline. Above ground, security personnel reported a glowing red object hovering directly over the silo. Years later, Salas would recount the event with steady precision, not speculation. He described how multiple Minuteman ICBMs went from alert to no-go within seconds, without any identifiable malfunction. At first, he suspected a systems failure, until the calls came from the guards above, describing what they were seeing in the sky. Salas stayed quiet for decades. When he finally spoke publicly, his tone remained measured. I'm not saying it was little green men. I'm saying something with capabilities far beyond ours interfered with our most powerful weapons. He wasn't the only one. Colonel Charles Halt, Deputy Base Commander at RAF Bentwaters, in the United Kingdom, came forward with his own account years later. In December 1980, Halt led a team into Rendlesham Forest to investigate strange lights near the base. What he and his men witnessed a structured craft, maneuvering silently and shining. Beams of light into the weapons storage area left them stunned. Holt recorded part of the encounter on tape and filed an official memo with the US Air Force, a seasoned, no-nonsense officer. Holt later stated plainly, this was real. It was not from any known military force on this planet. More voices followed. Major Joris Filaire, an Air Force intelligence officer and flight controller, served during the height of the Cold War. He recounted receiving a report from a fighter pilot who had locked onto a fast-moving unknown object, only to watch it accelerate and vanish in an instant. Filaire documented the event, but the report disappeared into classified files. We were told not to pursue it, he said. But I know what I saw on radar. That object was not ours, and it wasn't theirs either. In 2001, a group of retired officers gathered at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., as part of the Disclosure Project. They're missile launch officers, radar specialists, and intelligence analysts spoke publicly about incidents long buried in classified channels objects, hovering over missile fields, disabling control systems, and then vanishing without a trace. Lieutenant Colonel Dwayne Arneson, a communications officer at Malmstrom, confirmed that messages about UFOs interfering with missile systems circulated through secure networks. Never officially acknowledged, but never denied internally either. Another speaker, Captain Bruce Fenstermatt, described witnessing a glowing object above a missile site in Colorado during the 1970s. Shortly after, the missile's guidance system failed. His report was classified soon after submission. What made these testimonies remarkable wasn't just their content, it was their consistency. Different decades, different countries, different branches of service, yet the same pattern appeared again and again. Unknown aerial craft near nuclear facilities, triggering equipment failures, and departing without a trace. And this pattern wasn't limited to the United States. Colonel Boris Sokolov, a retired Soviet defense official, later confirmed that similar incidents had occurred in the U.S. He described one case where unidentified objects appeared over missile bases in Ukraine, causing sudden, unexplained changes in launch status. Events that closely mirrored the 1982 Bilokorovich incident. Different sides of the Iron Curtain. Same technology, same silence, same mystery. Across decades of secrecy, one truth remained. Those who wore the uniform, trained to separate fact from imagination, had seen something real, something intelligent, something watching. As the 20th century faded into the 21st, our language for the unknown evolved, but the mystery itself refused to fade. What people once called UFOs, unidentified flying objects, became known by a new, more clinical term: unidentified aerial phenomena. Governments and militaries around the world rebranded the phenomenon to strip away the stigma of science fiction and make room for data, for evidence, for analysis. Yet despite the new vocabulary and the rise of technologies that could see farther, sharper, and deeper than ever before, the same pattern of mysterious intrusions continued. Radar arrays could now detect something the size of a basketball from hundreds of miles away. Satellites crowded the skies, scanning every inch of the planet. Infrared and multispectral sensors pierced through darkness, rain, and clouds. Drones mapped the atmosphere, and artificial intelligence sifted oceans of data in search of anomalies. And still, in the very places where humanity's most dangerous creations lay hidden are nuclear weapons, reactors, and laboratories, the unexplained continued to appear. It was a pattern that reached back to the dawn of the atomic age, to the deserts of New Mexico, to the fields where the first bombs were born. Silent lights, metallic shapes, objects that hovered with impossible patience, accelerated beyond the limits of known physics, and vanished as if stepping through the fabric of reality itself. The pattern endured, as if drawn toward the same energy that first split the atom. In April of 2004, that pattern returned to its birthplace. At Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico, the site where the atomic bomb was created, security cameras captured an extraordinary scene. A glowing orb, about 10 feet across, appeared above a restricted plutonium storage area. It hovered silently for more than a minute, pulsing with a cold internal light before drifting away into the dark. Infrared imaging showed no heat plume, no visible propulsion. Every motion sensor around it triggered, yet the perimeter alarms remained silent. When helicopters arrived minutes later, the object was gone. The incident was buried inside routine security logs, sealed under national security protocols. But insiders later confirmed the event to researchers, describing how the object moved with deliberate calm, as if observing rather than intruding. Los Alamos, the heart of atomic invention, had once again drawn the attention of something unearthly. 2 years later, the phenomenon stepped from secrecy into the public eye. November 2006, Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. A clear afternoon sky, crowded with aircraft. Without warning, a metallic disc appeared above Gate C-17 at the United Airlines terminal. It hung motionless, reflecting the late sun, while ground crew and pilots stared upward in disbelief. For nearly 10 minutes, the object remained suspended in the air, silent, gleaming, untouched by turbulence. Then, as abruptly as it had come, it shot straight upward so fast it punched a perfect hole through the overcast cloud layer, a circular window that lingered in the sky. The Federal Aviation Administration denied any radar contact, dismissing it as a weather anomaly. But the witnesses, trained professionals, insisted otherwise. One ground worker told reporters it was too close, too clear, and too solid to be anything else. If the skies above O'Hare were no longer sacred, then nowhere was. Even in the heart of civilian airspace, the phenomenon moved freely, unannounced, unstoppable. Between 2010 and 2015, a quieter drama played out in Washington state at the Hanford site, the sprawling complex, where the US once produced plutonium for its nuclear arsenal. By then, Hanford had become a hazardous wasteland, home to millions of gallons of radioactive waste sealed deep underground. Yet, night after night, glowing orbs and structured lights appeared above its restricted zones. Security patrols caught them on infrared cameras, luminous, egg-shaped craft drifting above waste tanks and reactor shells. They moved slowly, deliberately, as if surveying. One incident in 2012 showed a bright object following a convoy before vanishing over the desert ridge. Another in 2014 involved a triangular formation of lights hovering above the B reactor itself. Black Hawk helicopters searched the skies. Radar showed nothing. Leaked Department of Energy memos later confirmed that internal alarms had been triggered and that sensors malfunctioned during the sightings. Officials offered the familiar line, "No threat detected." But for those on the ground, it felt like something more. An audit of our atomic scenes, conducted by unknown eyes. Meanwhile, at sea, the phenomenon was no longer isolated. Between 2014 and 2015, Navy pilots operating from the USS Theodore Roosevelt began to encounter unidentified craft on a daily basis off the US East Coast. These were not vague lights, but solid, structured objects, cubes encased in transparent spheres, moving with precision and intent. Lieutenant Ryan Graves, one of the pilots, described how the objects could hover in place against strong winds, then accelerate to hypersonic speeds with no visible propulsion, no exhaust, and no sonic boom. The encounters were recorded with cutting-edge infrared targeting systems, the same technology used to track missiles. The now famous gimbal and go-fast videos came from those missions, showing sleek, rotating craft, defying every aerodynamic principle. Unlike past sightings, the Navy confirmed these videos were real. The Pentagon could not identify what the pilots had seen. Graves later testified that the objects were present every day, for months. He was certain of one thing: they were not ours, and not anyone else's. Then, in December 2017, the mystery broke into the mainstream. The New York Times revealed a secret Pentagon program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP. Funded quietly by Congress and led by intelligence officer Luis Elizondo, AATIP had investigated these unexplained aerial events for years. What they found defied logic. Objects that could accelerate instantly, perform 90-degree turns at hypersonic speed, and travel between air and water seamlessly. Some materials recovered from alleged crash sites showed unknown isotopic ratios and bizarre structures at the atomic level, so-called exotic metamaterials that hinted at non-terrestrial origins. Officially, these claims were unverified. Unofficially, they shook the defense world. By 2021, Congress demanded answers in hearings broadcast worldwide. Defense officials confirmed that UAPs had been observed near sensitive military infrastructure, including nuclear facilities. Lawmakers were briefed behind closed doors, and for the first time, the phenomenon was treated not as fantasy but as a potential national security issue. The reports did not stop there. In 2020, residents near Oak Ridge, Tennessee, home to the Y-12 National Security Complex, a major uranium enrichment site, witnessed a massive triangular craft gliding silently above the treetops. It moved slowly, its edges glowing with amber light, before fading into the clouds. The sighting echoed similar events at the same site more than 60 years earlier, suggesting a cycle, one that began with the dawn of the nuclear age and has never ended. Across the ocean in 2021, French security patrols near the Marcoule nuclear site reported a glowing object hovering over a cooling tower before accelerating skyward. A classified report from France's National Aerospace Agency confirmed there was no aircraft in the area. Europe, too, was now part of the pattern. As technology advanced, the evidence multiplied. Radar, thermal, optical, and satellite data all converged, creating multi-sensor confirmation of events that once relied solely on human testimony. In 2023, the US established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, to study these cases across air, sea, and orbit. Hundreds of reports poured in. Many involved restricted zones, nuclear facilities, or military operations. And yet, none of them had been solved. The official line remained cautious. There was no evidence of extraterrestrial origin, but no indication that these objects belonged to any known foreign power either. Somewhere between those two denials, the mystery lived on. The pattern remained unchanged through decades and generations. They hovered silently. They accelerated instantly. They ignored gravity, propulsion, and inertia. They appeared over our weapons, our reactors, our most dangerous technologies, if drawn to the places where human power meets its greatest peril. From Los Alamos to O'Hare, from Hanford to the open Atlantic, from Oak Ridge to Marcoule, the locations changed, the witnesses changed. The craft did not. Even in an age of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and exascale surveillance, they remain beyond reach. They slip through radar nets, evade fighter jets, and appear where our defenses are strongest. Maybe they are observers, maybe they are warnings, or maybe they are mirrors, reflecting back the consequences of what we've built. We changed the language from UFOs to UAPs. We built better eyes, faster sensors, stronger firewalls. But we still do not know what watches us. They appear where the atom sleeps. They move with intent. They disappear without a trace. And even now, in this century of cameras and satellites, we are still left with the same haunting truth. They are silent, they are precise, and they are watching. For over 70 years, a shadow has lingered over humanity's most destructive creations. It's a story told not in headlines, but in hushed conversations, declassified reports, and the haunted testimony of soldiers who stood on the front lines of the Cold War. From the moment we split the atom, something started watching us. The question is, why? After decades of accumulating data, military testimony, sensor recordings, and quiet admissions from those in the know, a haunting pattern has emerged. Unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, have a persistent, undeniable fascination with our nuclear weapons. Think about it. The timeline is undeniable. We see these encounters stretching from the deserts of New Mexico in 1945, right after the Trinity test, all the way to today. They appear over Montana's missile silos, in England's Rendlesham Forest, above Ukraine's nuclear bases during the Soviet era, and across the vast Pacific where nuclear submarines patrol. The reports are eerily similar. Missiles mysteriously powered down in their silos, launch sequences abort for no reason. Unknown craft drifts silently above top-secret storage sites. Radar operators track objects moving at impossible speeds, with no known aircraft or satellite to explain them. These encounters are always calm, deliberate, and strangely detached from human conflict. It's as if they are operating on a completely different level, unconcerned with our politics or wars. Yet, their purpose remains a profound mystery. Are these entities simply observing, watching humanity's most dangerous capabilities from a safe distance? Or are they conducting tests, issuing warnings, or even making subtle interventions? So far, the evidence points away from any kind of hostility. In over 70 years of these close encounters near nuclear sites, there has never been a single attack, no detonations, no lasting damage. Instead, something far more unsettling happens. Weapon systems are often disabled, not destroyed. Launch controls flicker and die. Communications go silent. And then, just as mysteriously, everything resets. It's as if someone or something is demonstrating absolute control, not aggression. This has led many researchers, and even former military officials, to believe that these actions are a form of deterrence. Mensaje. If an external intelligence wanted to prevent a nuclear holocaust without direct confrontation, what better way than to quietly show us that our most powerful weapons are, in their presence, useless? It's a display of power without violence. A technological check. The timing of these incidents only strengthens this theory. Sightings and interactions spike right after every major nuclear milestone. It happened after the first atomic explosion in 1945. It happened again when the Soviet Union conducted its first test in 1949. Encounters surged during the massive missile expansions of the 1960s. They were reported around naval deployments of nuclear arms. Even today, they are sighted near modern-day nuclear waste storage projects. The pattern is crystal clear. The activity is concentrated near nuclear-related locations, not heavily populated civilian areas. This has given rise to what's known as the observer hypothesis. This is the idea that these phenomena aren't invaders, but watchers. They are drawn to humanity whenever we approach a dangerous technological threshold, like scientists observing a volatile experiment. They seem to monitor us whenever our actions risk altering something fundamental about our planet or our existence. Theories about their origin are all over the map. Extraterrestrials, secret human programs using breakthrough technology, time travelers from our own future, or even interdimensional beings. But regardless of where they come from, their behavior remains remarkably consistent. They approach, they observe, they sometimes interfere gently, and then they depart without a trace. During famous incidents like the one at Malmstrom Air Force Base in 1967, or the Bilakorovich incident in Ukraine in 1982, the precision of these interactions was stunning. At Malmstrom, multiple ICB, intercontinental ballistic missiles in underground silos suddenly went offline, one by one, as a glowing red object hovered overhead. The security guards were terrified, but the object never showed aggression. It simply demonstrated an ability to shut down our most secure weapons at will. Then, it left. Moments later, the systems came back online. The message was delivered. Some high-ranking US Air Force officers speculated back in the 1980s that humanity's nuclear progress might have triggered this external observation, marking a moment when we crossed some kind of cosmic, scientific, or existential line. Colonel Charles Holt, the deputy base commander during the Rendlesham Forest incident, later suggested that these craft may be monitoring our management of technologies that we don't fully understand or control, our nuclei arsenal being the prime example. Others see the phenomenon as a psychological reminder, a cosmic tap on the shoulder to let us know that our perceived control over total annihilation SNT absolute, that even our most secure, triple redundant systems can be effortlessly touched by an unknown intelligence. Of course, there is a darker perspective. What if these visitors aren't trying to prevent a war, but are actually studying it? Perhaps they're observing how a species like ours handles the power of self-destruction. Maybe they're just gathering data, learning from our technological progress and our potential failures. But for now, this remains pure speculation, as there's no evidence of malicious intent. What we can confirm, based on the official record, is this: their actions are measured, and non-lethal. They consistently avoid combat. They easily evade pursuit by our most advanced fighter jets, and they vanish without a confrontation. The deafening silence they leave behind has become their signature. Over the decades, our terminology has evolved. We went from calling them flying saucers to UFOs, and now the official term is UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena. Sometimes they're called anomalous objects or transmedium craft in government reports. But changing the name doesn't change the mystery. It's still the same story. Glowing lights over silos, inexplicable radar interference, sudden power losses, and that same unbroken quiet afterward. For the men and women who witnessed these events firsthand, the soldiers, the technicians, the pilots, the questions have never gone away. Why here? Why our base? Why now? And why? Always near the weapons. Some of them have come to accept that a full answer may never come in their lifetime. Others believe that official disclosure is just around the corner, that hidden archives in the Pentagon may already hold the incredible truth. But for most observers, the message seems clear enough, even without a grand revelation. Something is here. It is behaving with intelligence, and it is responding directly to our actions, especially our relationship with nuclear power. Ever since that first atomic fire lit up the sky over New Mexico, that strange, silent presence has lingered watching, perhaps protecting, and maybe, just maybe, warning us. And still today, deep underground in missile control centers, or across the silent, vast oceans where nuclear submarines glide, it continues to remind us of its existence, not through words or threats, but through the quiet, chilling choreography of lights that appear in the night, systems that inexplicably fail, and a silence that follows, which is louder and more profound than any alarm. Thanks for watching. What do you think's going on at our nuclear sites? Let me know your theories in the comments below, and if you found this exploration as fascinating as I do, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's greatest mysteries. See you next time.